Just an example. Oh yeah, there was a Italian soccer coach, and they finally got up to being in the World Cup. But through the playoffs, through the things, the coach insisted that all his players were celibate and they couldn't see their girlfriends. And they did really well most of the way, but in the end they lost because they were forcing the workers to work harder, the players to play harder than what was natural for them. And normally at the end, it's the adrenaline of proving something to your girlfriend or boyfriend that adds the extra adrenaline to go. But he had an extreme understanding of this is how it has to be from the culture he came from and was imposing it on the team, which generally worked. But the team did better before the playoffs when he wasn't imposing that. And he was applying a system that didn't exactly work, and everyone's trying to live up to it. Or figure out, saying, what's this? No, like it destabilizes the guidance system a little bit. The coach is a wingnut. Okay. The same thing can come in with you're in you're married, you got your kids, you got everything locked in, but you're finding into something that's different than anything else in the family. You got a different understanding. You're out there understanding something different. Everyone else will think you're going nuts a bit. But you take it as your hobby, you go do it, build it up, but it's changing your understanding. That change of understanding can run into a collision with your partner who's trying to do it just stably and guiding the actions accordingly. So, okay, Neptune, where are we? Oh, we're already over. We're going to be a little bit over today. Sorry. Neptune and Jupiter. Neptune's feminine planet, Jupiter's feminine planet. They both don't have edges. Neptune is the big schemes, the dreams, the visions, the faith, and the expectations, and Jupiter's your understanding of it. So these two can exaggerate themselves incredibly, could have really exaggerating understanding. It could be really cosmic, vast understanding, a very totally moralistic understanding, or a totally guilt-ridden understanding. It could be any of those. You don't know if the Neptune's causing positive or negative, but it's certainly confusing the edges of what's responsible and not responsible for Jupiter. So Jupiter exaggerates, Neptune exaggerates even more. So there's a decline to be a little bit more fanatical. You won't see it directly in a person's chart when you're doing it, but it's when those two planets, like outer planets to outer planets, you don't see them so much. You can see Mars, but to Jupiter, you have to struggle. To Saturn, it's you sort of slightly see it. And between the outer planets, everybody for a generation has it, so they're not as specifically there as if Venus was hitting this or Mercury was, as if these outer planets were hitting the personal ones. They become really extreme, much more noticeable. But this is a shift in your guidance system, so it can be really tempting, unreliable, visionary, mystical. It can be really imaginative and very mystical understanding, or a very mystical sense of faith, or it can be really guilt-ridden, confused, or corrupt. So there's some temptation or puzzle to believe I should do this, I could do this, I could do this. Why stick with just the boring? To avoid it, it exaggerates, but it's exaggerated in a way that will get you to encourage your actions to not work towards career. People who've made a dedication to leave a job and they're just dedicated to a social cause or something, they might have something like this very strongly. But it's how it influences the Mars and the Venus. Now, if those two planets are together, it's how they come up and hit something. It's also the Neptune will dump on Jupiter. Jupiter will hit Mars or hit Venus or hit Mercury. It'll go from those houses, like the older brother hits the younger brother, who kicks the dog, who bites the baby, or something like. There's a hierarchy of strength, and the anger just runs right through. So everything's possible with this. So it really can exaggerate. So if these two line up with the moon, those are definitely often might be diabetic or excess weight or other problems coming in, both adding up to each other and affecting the lifestyle. Or it could be an alcoholic home situation. So there's puzzles from Neptune and guilts and sorrows, and your understanding is running into that, but then you have to learn to listen to Saturn to see what defensive steps you can take. But at first you don't want to do that because you have a negative sense of Saturn. Usually it's pulled you out to something, I got to get away from this. And really Saturn just introverts to your self-discipline and it's your own authority. With Pluto, Pluto is a powerful, it's the confrontation reality check. What's true, what's real, what's bullshit? Is there a God, isn't there a God? What's real? There's a harsh factor with Pluto and a fear factor with Pluto and a truth factor with Pluto. So no vast, vague understanding, it's exactly this, exactly that. So often there's a fearful understanding that one has to overcome, or one understands that one has to fight a fearful injustice, like abuse at home, gangs, bullies, violence at school, wars, armies, things having to fight. There's a battle and there's a fight for the person to understand what's right. If I know what's right, there'll be power in your face that's frightening you. If you go for what's right, there's repercussions that you're afraid of. So if you're in the gang and you decide you want to get religious or want to do something good and you don't want to be in the gang anymore, your life's threatened. If you're in the government, if you're working any team, by the time one person works away from the team, if you're going to church and you decide you don't want to go, everyone's going to blame you. The blame is Neptune, but the confrontation of repercussions, that's Pluto. There's a fear of what's true and what's not true. Is this understanding true or is it not? And that struggle, like I have this aspect, and it's Pluto to Jupiter and square, and I've always been fighting. I have an intolerance to misunderstanding or wrong judgments, way beyond what's normal. And it drives me to have to push astrology to see this, to prove this is real. And I'm almost too extreme in doing that. Then I have to work through that and not let the fear control me. Like not everybody's going to drive the same way or understand the same way. So fear isn't acceptable. Deception, confusion isn't acceptable. Like shock and disruption isn't acceptable. It can be useful at times, but really they're factors that distort your understanding, which is normally the planets you can see, Saturn and In. Those are the noble planets. Those are the rulerships. Those are the ones you can see and understand. And the other ones, they're there. They can bring exciting and visionary and really powerful insights. But I just thought, like the guy who started the Baha'i religion, he was like the next prophet after Muhammad. But he was never accepted. Everyone tried to kill him. He spent most of his life in jail and had horrendous things happen to him because other people were frightened by his belief and would not accept it. And they were fighting. He took the fight to have to hold on to it. And it's one of the world religions now, not a huge one, but still is. It went beyond his lifetime. But everyone remembered him for how strong he stood up to truth. But there were many battles and lives and deaths that happened around it. So these are extreme examples, but the same thing could happen just a kid growing up. They got this, there's that. If a kid has this aspect in their chart, it was happening between the parents around what's right or wrong understanding at the time the baby was born. Because your chart is the transits between your parents at the time you're born. So if you've got a difficult aspect, they had it when you were born. So, okay, this is, Jupiter's a funny, like these other ones are just a little stranger how they influence each other. You can't expect them to be as blatant. They're powerful, they're there, but they're hidden. They're in their subtle influences. So you can see a kid and just think they're in school, they're doing this, that. You don't know they've aligned with this group or that group, or their understanding is becoming angry or whatever. But can happen at any age, at any time. If you've got this predisposition, you have a fight with your teachers over what's right or wrong, and a fight over how to guide yourself over what's right or wrong. Okay, yeah, we got 10 minutes over, but this is Jupiter. Next week we're dealing with Saturn, and we'll start to see the weight of Saturn and its presence and how it affects the Jupiter and how it's affected by the outer. So seeing these different layers, different frequencies, these are the different textures. You get different information from different layers. And everybody's got all of these layers. There's always relationship between each planet and each other planet. But when it becomes stressful, it starts standing out a little bit more. And there's a bit more tension around it and struggle around it. That struggle can lead to a great growth. But it does represent a struggle in life that one has to go through. Not necessarily, it's negative, but not necessarily, depending if you learn properly or not. So have you learned your lessons in life? Is your understanding blossoming? Are you struggling for it? Well, I'm still struggling. Okay. Thanks. Okay, so I'll see you next week and we'll deal with Saturn. Okay.